what got you into making and roasting coffee?
Well, we opened Midnight Espresso in 1989 in Cuba Street, and there was not a lot of choices for coffee. There was only a couple of coffee companies back then. I think there was Robert Timms, Robert Harris and Thags were the free coffee companies. There was another company called Bellaroma, which is the fancy boutique one, and we rang all of them and didn't really get much interest or service, and we started using Bellaroma to begin with, only for about a week, and there was absolutely no service. There was a guy called Tony Gibb, who's actually, I think he's got a coffee roastery on the terrace now called Coffee. And then we went out to Fags. Fags was a big company, but we found out they roasted in Lyell Bay. And they roasted on a Wednesday. So we used to go there on a Wednesday and pick the coffee and get it when it was warm and get these big bags of Fags coffee, because what happened was Midnight Espresso sort of took the coffee roasters by surprise in New Zealand, or in Wellington back then, because what happens when we opened Midnight Espresso, it was really busy. Like we didn't know it was going to be that busy as well. We didn't know that there was a lot of people that wanted what we wanted. We just wanted somewhere we could go and drink coffee and hang out. But the average coffee shop probably did about 1 kilo of coffee a week through a Kona machine, and we had this big old espresso machine we'd brought in from Canada, and we put it on the counter, and we opened from 9 in the morning till 3 in the morning, serving espresso. So all of a sudden we were doing 20 or 30 kilos of coffee a week straight away. So it was a bit of a shock. No one took any notice of us, and then in the first sort of month it was noticeable that we were using probably the same amount of coffee as the whole rest of Wellington put together. So then we were really disillusioned by the coffee we were getting locally, and we found a coffee called Lavazza, which was Italian. We used to call it Lavazza! And we found the distributor for Lavazza and brought all the Lavazza coffee. And then we thought there must be something more, we could roast our own. So it was actually my business partner, Tim. He said, let's roast coffee. So we had only been roasting coffee for about a week. He goes, I'm going to build my own coffee roaster. So he actually had a little sample roaster he had brought from somewhere. It was actually Swiss, a hot air roaster. And we've known each other since we were kids, and he always had this thing, he wanted to pull stuff to pieces and have a look at how it worked. And he pulled this little coffee roaster to pieces and looked how it worked, and basically upscaled it. And that was the Mark 1, the Voltaire Mark 1 was just the upscale of the little roaster he had built. So we went from very quickly we went from building a coffee shop to selling espresso to roasting coffee to building a coffee roaster to roasting coffee. So that was the very early days. That all happened in the first sort of 6 months of Midnight Espresso.
So you always wanting to do that when you were younger, or was just
No. I was a deep sea fisherman, and he was in film. I got kicked out at home at 14 and went deep sea fishing, and he was doing boat building and lighting, gaffer work for lighting on movies. And then he wanted to go and boat build in Canada, and I went travel around with the Grateful Dead selling clothes, making my own clothes and selling tie-dye. And we were both hooked up in Canada. We both hooked up about 6 months later in Canada and hung out. And he said, "You come, there's all these great coffee shops." And we went down to because back in 89, 88 in Wellington, there was no coffee shops. It was like public bars. And if you wanted to go out after 10 o'clock at night, you had to go to a nightclub. And to go to a nightclub, you had to wear certain shoes, and you couldn't wear trainers, you couldn't wear jeans. So all of a sudden, to go out at night, you had to dress up and buy alcohol, and the music was really loud, and we didn't really want that. In Canada, we saw there was coffee shops that was open late. You could just go there, be music, it might be Bob Dylan on the stereo or Dire Straits or something, and you'd walk in and a pool table, and you'd go to buy coffee and donuts at midnight, and sit there and talk. And the thing about coffee is like alcohol, when you drink more alcohol, you brrr like that. But with coffee, it's like, yeah, we can build a bridge and we can cross the river. So we liked that energy, and so we thought, we want to go and create. We want to do this in New Zealand. So I was still doing my clothing, he was still doing his boat building and his film work, and together we went and brought a coffee machine. We found a place to buy a coffee machine in the industrial area of Vancouver, and we shipped the coffee machine back. Came back to New Zealand, forgot about the coffee machine and what we're going to do, and then we got a message saying the coffee machine had arrived at the wharf, and we had to go and pick it up. And so we had to. The reborn of the coffee idea was happening, so we got a garden hose and connected to the coffee machine and brought coffee and got our friends to come around and said, "We're going to open a coffee shop." And they all thought we were crazy, but that's how the coffee idea opened. So the coffee idea was born in Canada, and then we came back and opened a coffee shop. So we never, it was just we wanted to create somewhere we wanted to go. And we didn't know it was going to be so successful. There was obviously a whole lot of other people that wanted what we wanted as well. Yeah.
So what was coffee and cafe culture like in Wellington before you came along?
Before we opened in, well, I think that, coffee is cyclic. So in Wellington, you had the what I've heard is the turn of the century, and then I knew about the 50s and 60s coffee shops. So I think we were the first revival. So we were the end of the 80s, and in the 80s when we opened Midnight Espresso, it was really tea shops. It wasn't. They were cafes, but they had names like the Big Muffin or Kay's Tea Shop or Janet's Cafe, and they weren't really coffee orientated shops. They were more like asparagus rolls, toasted sandwiches, tea in a teapot, like the stainless teapot, and Kona coffee. There wasn't really many espresso machines. So I think our timing was perfect with in Wellington by putting the espresso machine on the counter and serving a lot of coffees, so that we changed from the 1 kilo of coffee a week to 20 or 30 kilos of coffee a week. And it was about coffee, it was about the energy, it was about the, if you're going to come and have a strong cup of coffee, you're going to feel it. So we, as part of that research, we opened the second one, which was Deluxe, which we only opened only about 6 months after Midnight Espresso. So we had Midnight on Cuba Street and Deluxe in Courtney Place. So we started covering it quite well, and then my brother opened Expressoholic in Willis Street in there was an old sort of greasy spoon cafe that was called the Mandarin, and it was owned, Chinese ran it, but it was opposite the Evening Post building, and it was great. It was long cafe. It was probably from the 50s. It was a long cafe from the days of the Greek coffee shops. There was a few left over in the 80s. That the Greeks were big in coffee in the 50s, and they had these amazing fit-outs with formica tables and mirrors that ran along, and the light shades and everything along, counters. And there was one that was the Asians running, but they were running it with just selling chips and snow freeze ice creams and stuff. And it was called the Mandarin. Me and Tim wanted to buy it as well, so we had Deluxe and that, and we found it. And we used to go there on our day off. We'd go to the Mandarin on a Sunday night. Was our only night off. We'd go there and have Wiener Schnitzel out the back. And the Chinaman that owned it knew that we had these two really successful coffee shops, because we sort of changed the map by putting this coffee on the map. And we used to say, we buy as a joke. And after about 3 months or something, one day we were there, and Tim had a baby in a bassinet in a holder when his wife was there. We were all having schnitzel, and the guy said, okay, me sell. And Tim's wife Helen said, if you guys buy this, I'm leaving, because we already had 2 coffee shops as yet, a new baby. Anyway, so it was too good to let go, so I told my brother who's had lots of cafes in Wellington, he's a very famous coffee person and cafe cook in Wellington, owner. He brought it and called it Expressoholic. So that's how Expressoholic was born. So we had Midnight Deluxe and he had Expressoholic. But then there was big wars between the brothers started to war over who sold the most coffee and who had the best coffee shop. Anyway, so we built this first coffee roaster. Tim and Russell built it, and it was called the Voltaire because it was electric and air. So that's why it's called Voltaire, because back in the days, historically, lots of coffee roasters were gas, and we always thought the gas put a bit of a gas film on the outside of the coffee. So we thought the Voltaire was much cleaner, and it got it's a bit like when you base the steak, you base the steak before you cook it. So it was a bit like we wanted to create to seal the heat in as quick as we could. Anyway, so they built this crazy Voltaire roaster, which is basically a tripod, a rubbish tin with a lid, a Kobe car exhaust with some toaster elements in it, and 2 sparkle blowers with a volume control. So what happens is the air runs up through the toaster elements in the Kobe exhaust and into the rubbish tin, and the beans circulate in the rubbish tin, so it's a cone shape. So that was Voltaire Mark 1. And so that revolve in their own. There's no hot spot, and they're revolving in their own air. So they built this Voltaire, and we started roasting coffee for Midnight Espresso and Deluxe. So straight away, Midnight Espresso and Deluxe, we're using 60 kilos of coffee a week, which is a lot of coffee. So this Voltaire, I think the Voltaire coffee the roaster might have done 2.5 kilos at once. So it's still a bit of roasting. It took about 10 or 15 minutes. So we used to heat and cool it. So the whole idea of the cone, the 2.5, is because the air had to lift the coffee as well. So the more coffee you put in, the harder it was for the air to lift. So we built this Voltaire coffee roaster and it went really well, and we were roasting coffee, but it was a bit of a job because we were already running the 2 cafes. And the cafes, one was open till midnight, one was open till 3 AM. And then we had to roast coffee, so we'd run out of coffee and we'd have to run up and roast. So Friday, it was the first one we built was the Voltaire Volume 1, the Mark 1. And it was a Friday, we had a major fire, so we were roasting on the top of Midnight Espresso. So me and Tim had an office up there, and we had this, our totally illegal Voltaire Mark 1 on the top of on the roof of the Watkins building. And so we'd have turns at roasting coffee. So we'd roast the coffee before. These days we know that you've got to age your coffee. You can't just roast it and use it straight away. But in those days we were learning. So we'd roast the coffee even for that night. Sometimes there'd be no coffee in the grinder. We'd have to run up and roast some coffee and put it in the grinder. But no one knew any better because we knew as much about coffee as anyone else knew. So we just tell people what's good and what's bad, and they'll believe us. The customers were our guinea pigs. Anyway, one night we were there and I was down in the cafe working with the girls. It was a Friday evening about 4:30. Tim was up in the office roasting coffee, and all of a sudden there was smoke coming down the building, and there was people shouting saying there was smoke at the top of the building, and then there was fire engines, and then I remember I ran up into the top of the building, but you couldn't see, it was dark with smoke, and the girls were screaming because they thought we were up in the fire. And the fire brigade all came, and then I got up there and Tim was like taking it all to pieces, and there was smoke everywhere, and he must, because with coffee it has its own energy, so if it gets too hot it just cooks with its own energy, so you can stop all the energy and then it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter. It's really dangerous like that. So what happened is he got the coffee, he must have started talking on the phone or something, I don't know what he was doing, but anyway he tipped the coffee out onto the roof, and then we heard the fire engines come in, and because we shouldn't have been up there roasting and the whole thing was illegal, we disconnected it and we ran with all the pieces of it into the lift shaft on the other side of the roof, and we opened up the roof, the lift shaft, and we put hid all the bits and pieces there, and we locked the door, and we went back, and then all the firemen arrived, and it was when the Vivian Street used to go up into the tunnel instead of down, so the way out of Wellington was in Vivian Street. And all of a sudden there was 9 or 10 fire engines there, and they came up with the snorkel one to get us, and the firemen all arrived, and they could see there had been a smoke, and they could see the burnt coffee. They went, "What happened?" We go, we don't know, we just saw it was like that. And they're looking around to see what had happened, and we said, we don't know what happened, we never said, but they sort of looking at us a bit suspicious now. Anyway, that was on the Friday night, it was in the papers on the Saturday and everything, the air cleared, we worked in the cafe that night. And on the Monday morning we got basically evicted from the office in the top by the landlord, so we had to go and find somewhere else to roast coffee. But we found a little place around the corner on Wigan Street where the bar is now, and what was really amazing is our logo already had the three factories on it, and it was just the logo that we had done. A friend of ours had made us for our coffee business. We wanted it to look sort of, here it is here.
That's it, right.
Yeah. And we went around the corner to Wigan Street. We found these 3 little cottages, and there it was. The logo was there, and we found that one of the cottages was for sale. So we moved our roaster that straight around there, brought the cottage, and set it up and started roasting. And then became quite around the same sort of time in the sort of 6 to 12 months after that. Lots of other cafes started opening because they thought if those clowns can have a cafe, I want a cafe. They look like they're having fun and making money. And so all of a sudden we started getting lots of orders from people wanting coffee as well. So our little roaster, which we did, still worked after the fire, because basically you're having a fire every time you roast coffee. We were so busy we started thinking about the Voltaire number 2. So that's when everything had to be scaled up, and that's where the Voltaire 2 was born. So we built the Type 2 and used that for many years, the Type 2. It was really successful. It was probably a 20 kilo roaster, which is quite a big roaster for its day, and it was hot air, so it was quite revolutionary. And at that point that we built that coffee roaster, the results were really good. We knew we had beautiful coffee coming out of it. We learned a lot about coffee, and I actually went to a few big trade shows in America and that, because we were thinking about building coffee roasters, because we knew we had something really clever. So roasted for that for many years, and then we had quite a few fires in that one as well, so that it got quite damaged. And at the point we were working on the Mark III, we built a Type 2 roaster, the replica of the Type 2, which is the one you guys have got, which was all properly built and brand new, which was about to be commissioned. And at the time we were about to commission it, we also got to the point where we had outgrown our factory, and we moved to a new factory where we were working on the Type 3. The Type 3 was again a 70 kilo roaster, like the Type 2, and we spent about $250,000 of our own money trying to develop this 70 kilo roaster. But the problem was, once you scale up, there's 70 kilos of coffee, the air won't lift it. So we ended up having to pull the pin on that and defeat our losses. And at the point that we were then already too big for the replica of the Type 2, and I went to a gas roaster, a gas hot air roaster, which is a drum roaster, which is a 60 kilo drum roaster from Petrocini, but we supercharged it. We put a Voltaire supercharger on it, and we roasted with that for many years here, until only 2017, when we then went across to the state-of-the-art Loring, which is all the principles of the roaster that is designed by a German, manufactured in America, and that's all the principles we were working on 25 years earlier. So what we actually brought was what we had already created, but made, all certified and made.
What do you think about Wellington's cafe culture now?
World class. Wellington's coffee culture now is world class. As far as like what happens, back when we started in the late 80s, people used to talk about having an amazing cappuccino in Sydney or something like that. But now what's happened is, about me and a couple of other guys, Jeff Kennedy, Chris Dillon, Mike Allpress, Mike's Auckland, but basically Chris Dillon from Supreme, me from Havana, and Jeff Kennedy from Lafare, all of us in the early days started around the same time, and they were a lot older than me. I mean, these guys are in their 70s now, I'm 50s. So that back when we started, we were all competitive, so we were all roasting really good coffee, importing really good coffee, and it was, the thing about us being competitive is that the public got spoiled, because we had this really amazing roasting raw product, plus we had the best dairy products in the world with the fat content in our milk. So all of a sudden we built this world-class coffee culture in Wellington, and then we've gone out to taken our coffee to the world. People have gone out to the world. We've opened in different places. That Supreme, I've opened in China. Supreme's open in Japan. So it's Wellington coffee culture is world class, and it's known around the world as one of the best coffee cities in the world. I mean, if you go to any coffee aficionado or journal, they talk about Wellington in it. So Wellington still is one of the best coffee cultures in the world.
Why do you think that is? Is it because Wellington's such a small? Why did it not Auckland and not?
Because the main guys we were Wellington. We were the ones that were running it. Apart from Mike Allpress, the ones that put us on the map. We were all in Wellington, and we were competing against each other. So that's why I reckon it was. And we're bringing the newest technology, and we're bringing the best coffee in. But I think that. And also we're all vying to make the best coffee. So the Wellingtonians have been spoilt, and that's why anyone in Wellington now, they all come back to Wellington and go, oh, I miss the coffee. When someone travels, if they got to live in America, or they got to live in Europe, or they got to live in London, they always go, oh, I miss the coffee. The first thing they say, I miss the coffee. And we ship internationally, and some people go, oh, I don't miss the wind, but I miss the coffee.
Your favourite coffee? What do you?
Well. It's a hard question to ask me. My favourite coffee is probably Cuban. I reckon the Cuban coffee is, out of all the coffees we've bring coffee from about 20 countries, but my favourite all-time coffee would be probably Cuban, because it's like the rum and the salsa and the music and the cigars. But really, my favourite coffee is I'm not a coffee snob. I mean, fresh coffee made well with great people and great conversations is my favourite coffee. I'm basically finished in coffee, because I've got a restraint. I'm not able to work in coffee now for 5 years, but I still am a brand ambassador for Havana, and one of my dreams was to grow coffee in the Pacific years ago, and so we've been doing that for 10 years now, and so we have our own coffee called Tana Havana, which is grown in Vanuatu and Tana Island, and we bring that in. So that's been a sort of something I've been really proud of, and just any coffee. The coffee I love is the coffee you feel.